Hello and welcome to the Kent and Medway All-Age Eating Disorder Service podcast. This podcast was recorded for Eating Disorder Awareness Week and has themes related to eating disorder recovery and the eating disorder journey. Please look after yourself whilst listening. Welcome everyone to our first podcast as part of the Kent All-Age Eating Disorder Service. We've got some really exciting topics that we're going to be speaking about today, including things related to recovery, and we hope that you find today's podcast really interesting. But to start with, we wanted to go around and give some introductions. We've got some staff members here, and we also have some people who have been in our service with us today. So maybe to start with, we've got Solomon, who's helping us out with some technology in the background. You may not be able to hear from Solomon, but he is here. And I am Chantel McKenzie. I'm a clinical psychologist here in the service.
And my name's Jess White. I'm an assistant psychologist working with the service.
And I'm Sophie Minns, and I'm another assistant psychologist working with the service.
And I'm Deborah, and I'm an alumni of the Speaks programme.
My name's Flo, and I'm an ex-service user of the All-Age Eating Disorder Service.
And my name's Alice, and I'm also a previous user of the Eating Disorder Service.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think we have a few questions to ask you all.
So, to start off with, I was just wondering whether Flo or Alice or Deborah, you could share with us as much as you would like to about your treatment journey and maybe some information about how it's impacted your life.
Yeah, so for me, my kind of treatment journey consisted of a combination of both support from the All-Age Eating Disorder Service, and then I also had some support from private therapy. So for me, my eating disorder had a huge impact on my life. So I had to take out quite a few months out of work just to really help me focus on getting better. And I was really privileged that I was in a position to be able to do that. I feel like at the time of my eating disorder, I didn't realise how much my eating disorder was impacting my life. I think hindsight is a great thing because now I'm able to look back and recognise that actually at the time I was missing out on so much. So social events, so birthdays, celebrations, hobbies, those sorts of things. And it's not until now that I'm able to reflect and realise how much of that I missed out on.
Yeah, so I was first, I first identified I had an eating disorder about 10 years ago, and like Flo, I had to take some time out of work because of it. That was the most obvious impact, although I've also, coming up to this time of year and it being Christmas, it makes me reflect on the occasions that I was there, but I wasn't really present. I wasn't focused on the enjoyment or having a nice time with the people. I was more focused on the food and all of the things that were worrying me instead. So I missed out on a lot of social opportunities. I feel like there was a lot of time wasted of my own life that I'm just getting back now, which is amazing. But also really... importantly for me, it impacted my fertility and that journey. So again, it's time that, if I hadn't had the eating disorder, I would have had a baby, or I could have possibly had a baby. Who knows what would have happened? But it certainly impacted on my fertility and the time it took to get pregnant. So that was the most obvious impact for me.
I was first diagnosed with anorexia when I was 19. I'm now 72, and I have lived with it all my life. It has been lonely and shaming. I've just completed 2 years of the Speaks programme and found that the eating disorder defined me. It became my life. So I'd wake up in the morning and my whole life has been thinking about, am I going to have to eat something today? Is someone going to offer me a sandwich? Will somebody bring a cake into work? How will I get out of social invitations? grateful then to eventually no one asks you, but then of course it becomes a very lonely life, very insular. It just becomes a coping mechanism that you live with.
Yeah, just wanted to kind of jump off the back of that. The other thing that I think is almost quite important to note is that for me, when I was really struggling with my eating disorder, I didn't recognise how unwell I actually was, which makes me now, I think I was quite good at putting on a bit of a front, and I don't think the people around me necessarily realised what was going on and to the extent it was going on, which therefore meant that I didn't really realise how much I was missing out on. I feel like it's not until now that I'm able to reflect and realise like how much I really missed out on.
I completely agree that if you'd asked me 5-6 years ago what the impact was, I wouldn't have had as fuller picture. I would say, well, I'm coping at the moment. I'm there. I'm having a lovely time. Whereas now, I realise just that I was there, but I wasn't actually focused on the conversations or having as nice a time as I could have been, because it is all consuming.
Yes, and I think as you get older, of course, you suddenly realise what you've missed and what isn't there at the point of time you've got older living with it. And that's when it hits you.
I'm wondering if that's something you guys can relate to, maybe that there was a period of realisation, or did that realisation only sort of come whilst you got to a place of recovery, or was there a time sort of during the journey that you realised where you'd got to, maybe you needed additional support, if you feel able to share?
I think for me, I don't know that there was ever really a light bulb moment where I kind of thought, I really need to start seeking treatment. I don't know if I had that. I think for me it was more of a case of, I'd considered the possibility of getting some support and getting some help. And I think the other thing is it takes so much bravery to take that first step. And I feel like that shouldn't be underestimated, how much courage that first step of reaching out for help actually takes. I know that at the time I was absolutely terrified. I was clinging on to my eating disorder in every way possible. But then it's not until you start getting your life back and you start living a normal, healthy life. There's events and days that stick out to me. So, for example, I went to London with a friend, and being able to go out for dinner and being able to join in with everything was one of those moments where I was able to go, look how far I've come. But I think it's not until now, that I'm really working towards a place of recovery, that I can really recognise just how far I've come.
I would say there's definite stages in my recovery, and that it has taken a long time to get to where I am now. But again, halfway through, so about 5 years ago, maybe, I was I would say it was about the halfway stage where I had gained back some elements of my life, and I was more flexible than I had been, less anxious around food, but there still wasn't that complete freedom. But I think at that time I would have said, well, this is good enough. I can cope. I just need to make sure I'm following this meal plan and that I have enough time to plan ahead. And but actually there wasn't that more freer letting go of all of some of those rules and that I still had in my head, that was still that eating disorder voice. I think I would have said it was good enough, whereas now I think, yes, it was worth pushing on and continuing. And for me, my treatment, so I've worked with a few different services just because I've moved geographical area as well. And I'm so glad that I went back once I'd moved, that I sought help again, because actually I wasn't quite there, and my world was starting to get smaller again, and the more rules were sneaking in. I'm really happy that I went back, but also happy that it was taken seriously. I guess maybe that's one of the concerns I had in the early days, like Flo was saying, that I'm just, if this is not serious enough, I'm not unwell, and I'm fine really. When actually, I'm pleased it was taken seriously by other people as well, and that we've pushed forward to get to this point now.
Yes, I got to the point where, because I'd lived with it for so many years, it became me, it defined me. It was how I lived. And I felt that I was too scared to do something because I felt that it's me now, so how do I get rid of it? It had become me and my lifestyle. I was achieving, I was working. And so I thought this isolated life I could still live and achieve. But it was getting into later stages when I retired, I realised how it had isolated me so very much.
Hearing you all speak makes me think about kind of those myths and the things that we see in the media, and how that term being sick enough, there is no one size fits all, there is no BMI cutoff when it comes to eating disorders, and I think that's really coming through in hearing you all speak. And I think it also moves us on quite nicely to think about that idea of recovery. I think Alice has already touched on it a bit, but that does look different to everyone according to their goals, their treatment, their diagnosis. So I'd like, invite you all to share what you feel comfortable about how recovery looks like to you. And what would you define as recovery?
I'm happy to jump in. So for me, I think that I see my recovery more of a journey rather than a destination. So for me, there isn't a weight or a certain way that my body will look that kind of denotes and marks recovery. For me, it's a journey. And even now, even though I was discharged last year, there are still things like even today I'm challenging myself with, and constantly being very aware of what I need to do to get my life completely back. For me, I see recovery as synonymous with freedom, essentially. So whether that's in the context of food, whether it's in the context of exercise, for me it's all about like living my life freely with the absence of guilt or constant food noise, or just the general kind of cloud, if you like, of an eating disorder. I think my journey now, so I'm now living in Australia, my life could not be any more different to where I was kind of this time last year, for definite. And I really think for me, recovery isn't about becoming the person that I was before my eating disorder. And I think that's something that's really important. For me, the version of myself kind of after my eating disorder is someone who's much more strong, someone who's really resilient, someone who's compassionate to themselves, is sympathetic towards other people. And all of those things I'm going to get by actively recovering. So I think it's just, for me, it's all about freedom and getting my life back.
For me, I've just completed the 2 years of treatment a week ago. And my recovery is, I'm aware I have the eating disorder. It won't go away, but I'm living with it and my voice is stronger now than the voice of my eating disorder. And they may not seem normal meals to most people, but I do eat 3 times a day, and I don't compensate if I eat a guilty food. I don't then go 2 days without eating. I make eating a pleasure. I actually have full-size dinner plate. I've bought a pan, a steamer, an ice glass and cutlery to make it a ritual that can be enjoyed. But I'm aware that on vulnerable days that voice could try and take over, but it won't. Not now I've found my own. And it's just a matter of learning how to cope with it and not letting it take over.
For me, that's really inspiring, Deborah. I think it's amazing. I think for me, my recovery looks like, for me, so it is about being able to go to the social occasions and enjoy them. So beforehand, not panicking about what I might have to eat, being able to eat spontaneously, not looking at menus beforehand, and I think and not compensating later on or the next day. I think I can do that some of the time. I'm very conscious of new rules then sneaking in about, well, one meal out a week is fine, but more than, I have to be really mindful of the eating disorder, trying to put in extra little rules. But yeah, it is that spontaneous, flexible eating without guilt, and normalizing that. I Now I have a daughter. Recovery also means to me, I don't know how much this has sort of helped, but I am so mindful. I want to model good eating for her sake, and she's weaning at the moment, and it is, that is my number one priority, is that she sees me eating healthily. She doesn't see me, restricting or adding in extra foods, or, even possibly worse, but saying, oh, this is your food, but I can only eat this, because I'm aware of the impact that can have, that you're allowed it, but I'm not allowed it myself. It's that, yes, if you're having that, I'm having that too, and we're all going to be happy and enjoy our food and not think about food as being good or bad. We're just going to, do the eating. So that's really on my mind at the moment, and recovery looks like me being able to do that for her sake as well as for my own.
I think I just want to reflect on what I'm hearing, really. It's so lovely to hear all these different types of recovery stories, and I think, you're three different people, you have different backgrounds, different ages. What I'm hearing from you all is that there is hope, that recovery, whatever that looks like to people, is possible, and with sort of support and the right support and engaging with services and sort of challenging yourself, which is super, super tough, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, I feel, is what I'm hearing. But yeah, I'm curious about what you guys might think about that, what you might add to that.
Yeah, I would just add that, because I have been seen by eating disorders on 3 separate occasions and discharged. And like I said, I'm just so glad I went back the last time, because that was almost the hardest time, because it wasn't as obvious from my body or my health that it was an issue, but I knew psychologically that it was sneaking back in again, and I was really worried to get to that point. So it wasn't a one and done kind of situation where I've been seen, I'm fine now, I can get on with the rest of my life. I'm really pleased that I went back each time.
And that you've learnt to recognise when there's a threat within you. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah, when I decided to ask for help, I didn't expect I'd get it because of my age, because of course the stereotype is a much younger person, and I was doubtfully hopeful and quite cynical when I went to get help. But my goodness, I'm glad I did. It's changed my life.
And I think it's so easy for us to, I know for me personally, I know that I was constantly kind of chasing a lower weight, and I was constantly chasing, whether that be a lower calorie intake or, whatever it was. And I felt the same as both of you, in terms of, I was so worried that, if I asked for help and my BMI wasn't a certain BMI, or my weight wasn't, lower than what it was, would I be taken seriously? But someone said something to me that really stuck with me, which was this analogy of drowning. So someone said, basically, if you had someone drowning in 10 feet of water and someone else drowning in 100 feet of water, both of those people are perfectly worthy of having a lifeguard jump in and help them. In the same way that if you reflect that into kind of eating disorders, whether you are, really, really underweight, or whether you are someone of any weight, you are just as worthy of help. And that for me really stuck with me. That analogy really helped me realise that actually, no matter what my weight was and no matter what my body looked like physically, what actually needed support and help was what was going on inside my head. And that, like I say, that analogy completely changed things for me.
I had a similar sort of moment. I'd gone to see a Buddhist monk, and I was telling him about what I was achieving and how I was dealing with life and doing really well. And he just said, "And where are you in your life, Deborah?" And that did it for me. It's true. You're not there if you have an eating disorder.
Lovely. These are such lovely things, I think, for us to reflect on. And it's so lovely to hear that you guys are in sort of different places now following treatment, which is absolutely fantastic. And it sounds like you've learned a lot from treatment, which is really lovely to hear.
And yeah, I just wanted to also reflect that recovery is definitely possible, but I think you've all been alluding to this, but it can be up and down as well, and might not always be smooth. And yeah, there might be new rules that come in, and there aren't any rules about what recovery looks like for different people. And so I was wondering whether any of you had thoughts on kind of having compassion for yourselves at the point you're at in your journey now.
I think for me, something that has taken me a long time to learn is, there was once a time where I used to get so frustrated with myself for having an eating disorder. Like, there were times where I thought, I just want to not have an eating disorder and just be able to eat like my friends were, like my family, or, I wanted to engage in all the social activities, but I just felt like I couldn't. And then I would beat myself up about it, which just created a vicious circle. So something that I really have now been able to learn is that my eating disorder once had a purpose. Like, it once had, whether it was a trauma response, whether it was a sense of control, whatever it was, it had its purpose. But I'm now in a position where actually I don't want my eating disorder to be a response to those things. I want to be able to cope with those things in a way that isn't restricting my food and over exercising. And something that really helped me was when I looked at what my eating disorder was giving me. So it was giving me things like a sense of control, a coping mechanism, versus what my eating disorder was taking away from my life. So being present, being able to attend social situations, going to work, living a healthy, balanced life. And actually, I just realized that my eating disorder was taking way more from me than what it was giving me and what it was providing me. And I think that it's really important to acknowledge that in my case, there was a good reason why, and it's understandable why I developed an eating disorder given what I was going through at the time. But I'm now at a position where, like I say, I don't want that anymore. I want to move away from that. So I think it's really important to not beat yourself up over having an eating disorder. An eating disorder isn't a choice. No one would choose to have an eating disorder. And I'm not saying that it's a choice, but what is a choice is the conscious steps you can take towards recovery. So whether that be asking for help, whether that's talking to someone, those are the conscious steps that you can take to work towards a better relationship with food and exercise. And like I say, eating disorders are not a choice. No one would be choosing to do this. But actually, like I say, what it gave me versus what it took away was so significant. And that was such a motivator for me.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I identify completely with that. I mean, eating disorders are seductive. They are seductive, and they do fulfil a purpose, a different purpose for different people. But you then come to rely on it. And for heaven's sake, I'd hate anybody to rely on it for as long as I have. I really do. And I'd love to see people do what I've done now much earlier.
In terms of having compassion for yourself, I first of all felt really, the early days of my eating disorder, I felt really strong and powerful about it because I was able to do this thing that everyone else finds so hard. I have so much willpower. And then I felt really weak, and that I was the one that got an eating disorder, and that I was the one being controlled by it. And why can't I just get rid of this? I thought I was clever and stronger than this to suddenly be actually seriously unwell with this. And then coming back round to that place of compassion, a bit like I think you said earlier, Flo, that actually and you're alluding to it as well, Deborah, I'm so much more than this. I'm actually really, really strong and really caring and really kind to myself, and realizing all these positive things about myself that have just been that are either things that I've learned through the treatment process or just through coming to terms with having an eating disorder, and doing life alongside an eating disorder for a little while. Actually, I'm recognizing all of the positive things about myself, and maybe I was a bit reductionist before about I'm just who I was, and
I just wanted to like jump in off the back of that as well in terms of like having compassion for myself. Something else I've really had to recognize and acknowledge is that my idea of health looks very different to other people's ideas of health. So, you know, for me, when I was particularly in my early days of recovery, I had a big list of fear foods and foods that, you know, foods that were, if you look at kind of a society, were very much demonized. But actually, the healthiest thing I could have done in that moment was challenge those fear foods and eat those foods, regardless of what anyone, you know, their kind of connotations of being unhealthy or whatever it was. And I'm now learning that actually there's no food that is as unhealthy for me as having an eating disorder. Like it, and everyone's idea of health is so different. For some people, going for a run every day and drinking green smoothies is the healthiest choice they'll make. For me, the healthiest choice I can make is not going for a run every day, because that would be compulsive and addictive, and actually eating foods that society demonize and say are absolutely dreadful. That's like the healthiest choice I can make in that situation.
Yeah, and the strongest thing I feel that I'm doing at the moment is ignoring anyone who makes little comments when they eat another mince pie or that kind of thing in a social occasion, or ignoring the well, come January it'll be, I'm just going to completely ignore all of these fitness things that are coming up, because I know that I just need to keep on doing what I'm doing. And I think that's where I feel like I'm still trying, but I can get that kind of perspective on, actually I know what is best for me now, and that's something that we've gained, that I think quite a lot of people still don't necessarily know what's best for them.
I think certainly all of that is so evocative of how I feel, but certainly I think at the moment what keeps me going is how I now see life that I didn't see, that I can take part in, and it's that is so rejuvenating, and it also is very good for self-care, and that feeling that you are important, and just being part of life is a great feeling.
I think you guys are all saying some really, really interesting and important things there. Just how much better life is now in comparison to when people are in the depths of the eating disorder. And I also hear, you know, we live in a society that does push lots of really difficult narratives onto us, doesn't it, about what is healthy, what isn't healthy, diet culture and things like that. And it's really hard. It's just really hard to exist in a society at the moment that's pushing those narratives. And I'm sure that's, you know, we're all human. That's going to impact us all. And I think it's really great to hear that you guys have been able to reflect on that and think about what's healthy for you, in a way that moves you forward and keeps you going towards the life that you want to keep living. So that's amazing. I mean, I am curious if you had any advice for anyone who's struggling with those narratives. You may or may not have any advice, because it is a really tough one. And I hear that ignoring some of these narratives is important. But do you guys have any other advice, maybe?
I think for me, it was about recognizing, like I mentioned earlier, that what is healthy for one person isn't healthy for me. I also think that there's kind of a degree of, you know, a lot of what I have encountered that I found really triggering has either been on social media or in an office setting, for example. That seems to be a place where there's a lot of diet culture talk. And as easy as it is to say, to kind of try and battle that eating disorder voice and acknowledge, you know, just ignore it. Actually, it can be really hard to deal with. And I think for me, recognizing that actually I don't find comments like that helpful. I don't find people commenting on what I'm eating helpful. I don't find that helpful. That was almost like an adjustment I gave myself, recognizing that when people make comments around food, or this narrative is being pushed on me, I in particular do not find that helpful. And that helps me be able to take a step away from it, because I just see it as almost like a bit of a, you know, it's just something that I struggle with that other people might not struggle with as much as what I do. And I think if anything, I just try and use it as almost motivation to do the opposite. So I'm now in a position where I'm able to challenge kind of, you know, triggering comments, whatever it is, But I know that there was once a time where I wasn't able to do that. So now I just see it as, if I'm in an environment where someone makes, kind of an offhand comment, I just recognize that they won't know the impact that comment has on me, and what can I do to change that narrative. So whether that's saying, well, this food isn't unhealthy, or nothing's as unhealthy as restriction. I think for me, it's now just about changing that narrative. And, that does take, a hell of a lot of courage to do. But I think, like I say, I now just use it to empower me and kind of educate people.
I think my bit of advice would be that everyone is different. Everyone's journey is different. So these are three stories, like three people's stories here today. But if your recovery journey doesn't look exactly the same, or takes longer, or has different kind of peaks and troughs during it, then that is also fine. So just to focus on the next small step, because it can feel overwhelming, especially if you've got quite a big goal at the end of it, like being able to go into a restaurant and just have a normal meal with friends, but just what's the next thing I can do right now, because I think that's what kept me going throughout it, rather than just throwing in the towel when it got tricky. What can I do today that's that small step in the right direction?
My advice would be, whatever your age, do look for help if you need it. It's too easy to think there's no point in me asking for help, because they would not be interested at my age. Don't think that. Do it. It's terribly important. And when you are older, and it is a lonely time when you're older, just think how much lonelier it'll be if you're older with an eating disorder.
And I think it's worth touching on the fact that we're speaking to 3 women today, but it's not just women who are affected by eating disorders. It's, anyone of any gender. And I think that's often a rabbit hole that we get sucked down.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think on the note of sort of advice, really, I'm also curious about what advice you might give to your younger self starting out treatment, or what advice would you give to someone entering treatment for the first time? So some quite big questions there, I think.
I think if I was to talk to someone who was like first entering treatment, I think the first thing I would want them to know is that they've already taken the hardest step. Like, that first step, good on you for taking it, because that takes an unbelievable level of courage. And I think acknowledge that. I mean, when I think back to when I first started treatment, did I want it? Did I really kind of have any motivation for it? Absolutely not. And that's completely okay. But trust the process and stick with it. I think I would want someone to know that recovery isn't necessarily about these big milestones that happen. It's not always. I think when I first thought of recovery, I thought I'd just be sat in front of food crying and screaming all the time. And do you know what, on occasion, that did happen. But sometimes I think it's actually more about showing up for it kind of shows up in quiet ways, and it's about showing up for yourself. And so for me, for example, being able to be trusted to be home alone was huge. And that was something so kind of minor that a lot of people would never have really acknowledged. But actually, it's about celebrating the kind of small successes. And I think that the kind of other big thing that I would really want to say to someone first entering treatment is to treat yourself as you would treat your friend. Like, for me, like, I know that I would never say to my friends, exercise a stupid amount. I would never dream of saying that. I would never dream of saying to my friend, or also I use the analogy of like the younger version of myself. When I think of myself as a child, there is no way that I would restrict her from eating her favourite foods in case she might gain weight. I'd never dream of it. So why am I doing that to my kind of current self? And then on the flip side of that, I also think about the version of me who, I don't know, however old I am, in a care home, looking back on my life, the last thing I want to do is look back on my life and think, oh my goodness, I wasted, so much time and missed out on so many precious things. because I had an eating disorder. Like, I don't want to be in that position. I want to be able to go on crazy adventures. I want to travel. There's so much I want to do. And those things, I don't want to feel restricted because I have an eating disorder.
I would say to my younger self that I am worth it. I'm worth seeking this help and going through this the assessment process even before the treatment process, because I think at that point I was so focused on my career and my friends and my family. It was around the time we were getting married, so I was spending so much time trying to keep all of these other balls in the air, trying to juggle everything, that I was getting neglected. And just to say, actually, all of that, apart from maybe the marriage itself, the rest doesn't matter. Like, you can, career can wait. Everyone else. I'm at the middle here, and I am, to go back on Flo's analogy, I'm drowning. I need to help myself, and that is what my family and friends would want me to do too. I am worth it. I don't need to worry about the other balls that I'm trying to juggle at the moment. That's all. Yeah, and I think it took a lot of time and it took courage to do that, but that's the point I needed to get to then start the recovery journey. So yeah, we are important enough to spend that time on.
Very good point. Self-worth. Don't let anybody else tell you how much you're worth. You know you're worth something. It's your own feelings of worth that are important, and meeting that need. And it is terribly important to have self-worth to take part in your life and be there. And go for the treatment. It's terribly important if you feel, even if you're cynical, do it.
I think one thing that really sticks out to me is this idea that no one has ever regretted recovery. Like, for me, the way that I looked at the treatment plan was very much, I'll stick at it. I'll trust the process, as scary as it was. Like, I don't want to make it sound like I just strolled into this and was happy to do it. Like, I was absolutely terrified. If I'm being completely honest, I had no, desire at the very start to follow it through. But actually, when I realised that I was starting to piece my life back together again, I really had that, I think you almost have these moments where you think, oh, there's a reason why I'm doing this. And that, I think, is what kind of pushed me through. And something that I did that I found really helpful was I kept a scrapbook of my recovery journal. So I started off, of me when I'd just been first referred, and I kind of just kept note of what was going on. And then throughout this scrapbook, I'm now able to look back at it and I can really see, not only physically, in terms of I've got colour on my face, I have got, light in my eyes. And I think that is something that I would recommend to anyone to do, because it just means that you have something physical and something tangible to be able to recognise how far you've come. And that I think for me was really important. It's not necessarily about proving, to anyone else, but for me it was about proving to myself that actually I'm way stronger than my eating disorder.
Yeah, I kept a journal every time I had therapy as well. It's very thick now after 2.5 years, but that looking back is terribly important as well, and that encourages you in your journey. Very good point.
Amazing. I mean, I think it's so lovely to hear about this, and it's such a privilege to hear from you guys, and for you guys to hear your stories and to hear your advice. I'm sure that people will find this incredibly helpful. And it's, such a privilege from our perspective as staff to have the opportunity, I think, really, to hear from you all. So, I mean, thank you so much for sharing.
Just as we're wrapping up, I just feel like I feel like it's really important to kind of say, for anyone listening, I feel like it could be so easy to listen to this and think, oh, these people have miraculously gone through recovery, and they've attended all of these appointments and now they're all recovered. But I know if I was in that situation, I could have listened to something like this and thought, recovery is designed for other people, but not me. But I just really want to kind of reiterate, just as we're sort of wrapping up, that anyone is capable of recovery. And I think that, if there's someone out there listening to this and thinking, recovery just sounds so distant, which I know I would have done when I first started, I just want to kind of be that voice to say that actually it is kind of cliche as it is, and as hard as it might be to believe now, there is definitely a life outside of an eating disorder, and there's so much more to you and to your life than what an eating disorder gives you.
Well, thank you. I wonder if that is a good place to end.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone for listening, and thank you for all our amazing people here today, and anyone who's contributed who hasn't recorded today. We just want to thank you all, and good luck on your own recovery journeys.